If I disappeared one day, I'm not sure my family would notice until the Wi-Fi started working faster. That was the kind of presence I had in my own home. My name is Jasmine Whitaker, and I was the eldest daughter. The first draft, the trial version, the one nobody bothered to update. My younger brother Connor was the finished product. Loud, polished, careless, and somehow always glowing under our parents' spotlight like a trophy they never earned. At school, I existed. I wasn't failing, wasn't shining, just a solid B kind of girl who turned assignments in on time and never gave anyone a reason to worry. At home, I was the daughter who cleared plates no one thanked me for, remembered appointments no one remembered for me, and bought my own things while Connor got rewarded for breathing in the right direction. But every Saturday, I had somewhere to be. Grandpa's house. A few blocks away, down a cracked sidewalk I knew better than my own bedroom. His porch always creaked in the same spot. The mailbox leaned like it was tired of holding bad news, and jazz always played low inside, like the house itself had a heartbeat. I'd knock, he'd grunt, then hand me a sandwich. 2 slices of turkey, always 2. Then we'd start the day. Yard work, fixing a hinge, cleaning gutters. Sometimes we sat in silence while he whittled wood and I listened to the radio. We didn't need much talking. The quiet at Grandpa's house felt warmer than the noise at my dinner table. "Connor ever stop by?" I asked once, sweeping leaves off his porch. Grandpa snorted. "That boy wouldn't know which end of a rake to hold." I laughed because it was true. My parents called Grandpa stubborn and old-fashioned, like he was some dusty piece of furniture no one wanted to throw away, but nobody wanted to polish either. They hadn't visited in months. Connor didn't even have his number saved. But I showed up every week, rain or shine, because with Grandpa, I didn't have to perform. I didn't need perfect grades, better clothes, or a louder personality. I just had to show up. And he noticed. He always noticed. There was a worn leather notebook he kept beside his recliner. Sometimes I caught him writing in it after I fixed something or carried groceries inside. "What's that?" I asked once. "Your memoir?" He didn't look up. "Future business." "Like a will?" This time he looked at me. Like recognition. I didn't understand then, but something in his voice made me stop smiling. It wasn't a joke. It had weight. Like he was talking about more than money, more than property. Like he was talking about me. At home, Connor was celebrated for everything. A new phone because he got a B-, dinner out because he thought seriously about applying to college. My mother called him gifted. My father called him misunderstood. Connor once forgot which month came after May, but somehow he was the family genius. Meanwhile, I worked part-time, helped classmates with homework, remembered grocery lists, and still got called too sensitive when I asked why my birthday cake had Connor's favorite flavor. One Saturday, after I replaced the weather stripping on Grandpa's garage door, he handed me a cold root beer and nodded toward the porch swing. "Sit." We sat there while autumn wind dragged the smell of cut grass through the yard. Then he asked, "What's the thing you're best at that nobody's noticed yet?" The question hit me harder than it should have. "I don't know," I said. "I don't think I've done anything that matters." Grandpa grunted and pointed toward the yard. "You fixed the mower last week, patched the fence before that, helped me sort the tax papers without one mistake. Those things don't get noticed." He turned to me, eyes narrow. "Sweetheart, the world doesn't reward useful. It rewards loud." I didn't know what to say, so I just looked down at the bottle in my hand. That night, Mom was in the living room, sipping wine and talking about how hard it was to parent a sensitive boy like Connor. "He's overwhelmed," she said. Connor was upstairs, yelling into his gaming headset. I stood in the doorway with grease still under my nails from Grandpa's sink repair. No one asked where I'd been. No one asked why my hands were scraped. Dad scrolled through real estate articles on his tablet, barely blinking. I wanted to tell them Grandpa had trusted me with his papers, that I'd fixed his porch step, that someone had called me useful like it was a compliment, not a burden. But they didn't ask, so I didn't tell. A week later, I got to Grandpa's early. I knocked. No answer. I had a key, so I let myself in. "Grandpa?" "Back room," he called. I found him in the room I'd always thought was just storage. Only now, it didn't look cluttered. It looked organized. Folders, receipts, old letters, bank documents, newspaper clippings, and photos. Photos of me. Me pushing his mower in the sun. Me carrying grocery bags. Me kneeling by the fence with a screwdriver in my hand. I froze. "You've been watching me?" Grandpa raised one eyebrow. "No, I've been noticing you. Big difference." I stepped closer. Every photo had a date. Every folder had labels. At the bottom of one stack was a copy of my report card with his handwriting beneath it. Nobody asked, but she still brought home straight A's that semester. My throat tightened. "Why?" I whispered. Grandpa closed the notebook slowly. "Because someday, Jasmine, you're going to need more than memories to remind you who you are." I didn't cry, but I came close. When I got home, Connor was stretched across the couch in a designer tracksuit, drinking a juice box like a tired prince. "Dad says I might intern at his company this summer," he said. "It's kind of beneath me, but whatever." Mom came in smiling. "Connor, sweetheart, I spoke to Mrs. Hammond at the club. Her cousin works at Redbridge Finance. We can pull strings." He shrugged. "Cool." I was standing at the sink, elbow deep in dirty water because the drain was clogged again. No one looked at me. That night, I called Grandpa. "Can I come by?" "You never need to ask." When I arrived, 2 root beers were already on the porch table. The notebook sat beside him like a quiet witness. "If you've been keeping score," I said, "what's the end game?" Grandpa smiled slowly. "Tell me something. If you got everything you ever earned, not what they said you deserved, not what they thought was fair, what would that look like?" I couldn't answer, because I had never dared to imagine it. "Exactly," he said. "That's why I'm doing this." "I don't want revenge," I said. "Good," Grandpa replied. "That means you're ready for something better." On the walk home, something shifted inside me. Not anger, not sadness, certainty. I couldn't make my family see me, but someone already had. And he had receipts. I couldn't stop thinking about Grandpa's question. If you got everything you actually earned, what would that look like? The thought followed me everywhere. Through school hallways that smelled like burnt coffee and cheap perfume. Through classes where professors barely remembered my name. Through nights where I lay awake, listening to Connor scream at strangers through his headset, while my parents laughed downstairs like he was charming instead of exhausting. Outwardly, nothing changed. Inside, everything had. At dinner one night, Connor announced he wanted to launch an NFT project. "I'm serious," he said, waving his fork like a motivational speaker. "It'll be emotional art, abstract moments from my life." Mom nodded like he'd cured cancer. "That's incredibly creative." Dad didn't even look up from his tablet. "You'll need startup money. We can move some funds around." I sat there chewing dry chicken while they planned an investment portfolio for a man who once got locked inside a revolving door. No one asked about my scholarship application. No one noticed I'd been working double tutoring shifts all week. I excused myself early. That night, I drove straight to Grandpa's. He was in the garage, half hidden under the hood of his old Mustang, while the overhead light flickered like it couldn't decide whether to live or die. "You keep showing up like this," he said. "I'm gonna start charging rent." I handed him a root beer. "I can't stand being in that house anymore." "Good," he muttered. I frowned. "Good?" He wiped grease from his hands. "Means you're waking up." We worked in silence for a while before he disappeared behind the workbench and returned holding a small metal lockbox. "What's that?" "Not yet," he said, setting it into my hands. I shook it lightly. Papers inside. "Grandpa." "When it's time, you'll know." His tone ended the conversation immediately. Back home, Connor was having another meltdown. "I don't understand this professor," he complained dramatically. "He says my essay lacks substance. What does that even mean?" Dad laughed. "Means you need a ghostwriter." Then all three of them looked at me. Mom smiled sweetly. "Jasmine's good at writing." There it was again. That familiar feeling. Like I existed only when something needed fixing. "Can't you just do it for him?" she asked. I looked at Connor, then at my parents. "No." The word landed so hard, the room went silent. Connor blinked. "No." "I have my own work," I said calmly. "Besides, your professor's right." His face hardened. "Excuse me?" "You don't have any substance." I stood up before anyone could respond and walked upstairs, while silence exploded behind me. A minute later, my phone buzzed. "Grandpa, took you long enough." I laughed before I could stop myself. For the first time in years, saying no didn't make me feel guilty. It made me feel awake. A few days later, I went back to Grandpa's house. He handed me a small key without explanation. "The box," he said. I stared at it. "You said it wasn't time." "You're not the same girl who walked in here 6 months ago." He was right. Back in my room, I locked the door and opened the box. Inside were envelopes, dozens of them, each labeled with a date. January 3rd. Connor's broken phone, paid by Jasmine, no reimbursement. February 14th. Mom's dead car battery, Jasmine replaced without being asked. March 22nd. Grocery payment, parents assumed family card covered it. Envelope after envelope, receipt after receipt. Every invisible thing I'd done for that family had been documented. Every sacrifice, every cleanup, every unpaid rescue mission. At the bottom was a handwritten letter. Jasmine. The world remembers loud people because they force themselves into the room, but builders leave fingerprints everywhere. Quiet people hold families together while everyone else takes credit for the house staying upright. I kept your fingerprints, not so you could prove yourself to them, so you never forget who you are when they try convincing you you're nothing. My chest tightened so hard it hurt. No one had ever defended me before. Not really. The next evening at dinner, Connor casually announced he was considering a healing gap year overseas. "Maybe Bali," he said, "or Portugal." Dad nodded proudly. "Smart. You need time to find yourself." I nearly laughed. "With my savings?" I asked. Connor frowned. "It's family money." "No," I said evenly. "It's money I earned tutoring while you filmed podcasts nobody watched." Mom immediately jumped in. "Jasmine, don't start." I pulled an envelope from my backpack and dropped it on the table. Inside was a breakdown of every deposit I'd made into the family account for college savings. Highlighted. Dated.
Documented.
Connor stared at the papers. Dad's face darkened. Mom looked genuinely panicked. You kept records? Connor asked. I almost smiled. Someone did. Then I stood up and walked out before they could regroup. That night, Grandpa texted me first. How'd they react? Like I set the house on fire. Good. Smoke means they finally noticed there was a house to begin with. The atmosphere at home changed after that. No yelling. No direct confrontation. Something worse.
Suspicion.
Mom suddenly started making breakfast again like we were a happy family in a cereal commercial. Dad kept trying to check in on me. Connor hovered outside my bedroom, pretending he wasn't listening through the door. One morning, Dad folded his newspaper and said carefully, "We've noticed some changes in your attitude." You mean boundaries? Connor snorted. Mom tried smiling. You've always been such a helpful daughter. The implication sat there between us.
Helpful. Useful. Convenient.
Never loved. Where did that get me? I asked quietly. Dad's expression hardened instantly. Don't be dramatic. I laughed once. It shocked all of us. Dramatic? I repeated. Connor crashes cars, fails classes, spends money he didn't earn, and somehow I'm the dramatic one because I stopped volunteering to save him? Nobody answered. Because nobody could. That evening, I went back to Grandpa's. He already had 2 root beers waiting. They made pancakes this morning, I told him. Grandpa groaned. Oh, they're nervous. I laughed harder than I had in months. Then he handed me another envelope. This one was thicker. Inside was a blueprint. His house. I added you to the deed last month, he said casually. I stared at him so long, he finally looked up from his drink. You're serious? I've never been more serious in my life. Connor's going to lose his mind. That's because Connor thinks inheritance is genetics. Grandpa leaned back slowly. It's not. It's recognition. The word hit me again.
Recognition.
Not pity. Not charity.
Recognition.
That night, when I got home, Connor was standing in my doorway, pretending to be casual. Hey, he said. Where's that box Grandpa gave you? I kept typing on my laptop. Why? No reason. Then why ask? His jaw tightened slightly. He's been acting weird lately, Connor muttered, like he's planning something. I finally looked up. He is. Connor's expression flickered. For what? I closed my laptop slowly. For the first time in your life, I said, something that isn't about you. Connor didn't take that conversation well. People like him never do when attention starts slipping through their fingers. He moved through the house afterward, like a detective in a low-budget crime show, suddenly interested in Grandpa's health, Grandpa's paperwork, Grandpa's state of mind. Funny how inheritance can create concern where love never existed. One afternoon, I stopped by Grandpa's with groceries and found Connor inside the study. Not visiting. Searching. He was crouched beside the bookshelf, holding a folder labeled tax records. The moment he saw me, he flinched. Oh, he said too quickly. Didn't hear you come in. I set the grocery bags down slowly. You usually break into elderly people's offices barefoot, I asked. Or is today special? Connor forced a laugh, but sweat had already started forming at his temples. I was just helping organize stuff. Connor, I said calmly, you haven't organized your own laundry since puberty. His face twitched. There's something going on, he snapped quietly. Grandpa's hiding things from us. No, I corrected. He's protecting them from you. That landed harder than I expected. For a second, I saw panic behind his arrogance. Real panic. Because deep down, Connor already knew the truth. He hadn't earned anything. And for the first time in his life, somebody important had noticed. That night, Grandpa didn't even ask what happened. He just looked at me over his coffee and smirked slightly. You feel it too, don't you? The storm? He nodded. It was already happening. Mom started acting strangely after that. Overly sweet, hovering around me in the kitchen, asking fake casual questions. So, you and Grandpa spend a lot of time together lately. We always have. She paused. Has he said anything unusual? I looked directly at her. You mean besides finally noticing who actually shows up? That shut her up instantly. Meanwhile, Dad became colder, sharper. Like every conversation with me was suddenly a negotiation instead of parenting. At dinner one night, Connor finally snapped. You think you're better than us now? I set my fork down carefully. No, I said calmly. I know I always was. You just never looked.
Silence.
Pure silence. Connor stormed out first, knocking over a chair on the way. Mom looked horrified. Dad looked angry. But underneath both expressions was something new. Fear. A few days later, Grandpa handed me a typed document.
Official.
Signed. Witnessed. My eyes widened as I read it. Effective immediately, Jasmine Whitaker will serve as co-executor of my estate and trustee over all educational and property-related holdings. I looked up slowly. Grandpa? You earned responsibility, he said simply. Not applause. Responsibility. I swallowed hard. That mattered more. Then he handed me a thumb drive. What's this? Backups. Of what? Everything. Every receipt, every ledger entry, every message, every contribution, every ignored sacrifice. Digitized, time-stamped, protected. For when they start rewriting history, Grandpa said quietly. And they will. He was right. Because 2 nights later, the performance began. Sunday dinner. The whole family seated around the table, pretending we were normal. Connor praying louder than usual, like God gave inheritance bonuses for volume. Mom trying too hard to smile. Dad pouring wine nobody wanted. Then Grandpa placed one envelope on the table. The room went still immediately. Even Connor shut up. Grandpa adjusted his glasses slowly before speaking. Before I go, he said calmly, I want no confusion. Connor leaned forward instantly. Dad's jaw tightened. Mom looked pale. Grandpa slid the envelope toward Connor first. Read it. Connor opened it confidently. That confidence disappeared line by line. I watched the color drain from his face as he flipped through the documents. The will. The trust. Property ownership. The house deed. The executor assignments. Then finally, the letter. Grandpa's letter. Typed cleanly across the page. To my family. Love without action is just performance. Jasmine showed up. Jasmine sacrificed. Jasmine repaired what all of you ignored. While you praised potential, she carried responsibility. This decision is not punishment. It is recognition. Connor's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Mom grabbed the papers next. Her hands shook. Dad read silently, expression hardening with every page. No, Connor finally whispered. This can't be real. Grandpa looked at him without blinking. It's real. You're giving her everything? Grandpa corrected him instantly. I'm giving her what she earned. Connor stood up so fast, the chair screeched across the floor. This is because she manipulated you. For the first time all night, I spoke. No, I said quietly. This happened because you thought being loved automatically made you valuable. Dead silence. Connor looked like he wanted to scream. Dad finally spoke. You're tearing this family apart. Grandpa laughed softly. No, he said. I'm exposing the tear that's been there for years. Mom suddenly turned toward me, desperate now. Jasmine, sweetheart, we didn't realize. That's the problem, I interrupted gently. You never realized anything. Nobody had a response for that. Connor started flipping through the documents again frantically. There has to be something else, he muttered. Another version. Grandpa smiled slightly. That's why backups exist. I placed the thumb drive onto the coffee table. Connor stared at it like it was a loaded weapon. Because, in a way, it was. Years of truth.
Documented.
Protected.
Undeniable.
The room fell completely silent after that. Not angry silence. Not dramatic silence. The kind that happens when people realize the story they've told themselves for years is collapsing right in front of them. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. Grandpa leaned back slowly in his chair, calm as ever. I'm not asking for anyone's permission, he said. I already made my choice. Connor looked shattered. Mom looked ashamed. Dad looked trapped between pride and regret. And me? I finally understood what Grandpa had meant all those months ago. Recognition wasn't loud. It was permanent.